Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. And first let's start with the global Ukrainian events, and according to information we have, the Germany this night, the previous evening, announced about another military aid to Ukraine, and the next military aid pocket is going to include missiles for artillery air defense systems IRST. Furthermore, this new military aid is going to include some artillery rounds of 155 millimeters and many other different types of weapon. So despite the complete absence of help from the United States of America, we see that European countries continue supporting Ukraine. So as I understand, this is not the last military aid pocket. Obviously this year there are going to be more. Now we are moving to Belgorod direction. We have also lots of interesting details and updates about the missile strikes that took place in this area and from this area. According to John Kirby, the Russians, for the first time since the beginning of the special military operation, used ballistic missile that was provided by DPRK. And furthermore, he published the map and the approximate direction of area of launches of that missile. Later, lots of internet users were trying to compare the DPRK missile Hwansong 11GA with Iskander, trying to find differences. And by the end of this night, so at the beginning of this morning, most of the users, internet sources, confirmed the information that was provided by John Kirby, that Russia currently has missiles of DPRK. The Russians are calling this type of missile Iskander. The DPRK analog is Hwansong 11GA, but we will simplify, and from now on Military Summary channel will call the Russian missiles Iskander, and the DPRK missiles we're going to call Kimskander, because it shows and represents the real situation with this probably new type of weapon. Furthermore, during the previous night, the Ukrainians made a very powerful attempt to attack Belgorod with the cluster rounds, with missiles with the cluster rounds. Most of them were shot down by the Russians on the fly, but as we can see, some of the Ukrainian missiles either was shot down and some parts fell down in a residential area and damaged the buildings and cars that were left by people. Now we are moving to the situation on the ground. We have some updates. First, we're going to talk about Kreminna. As you can see, Military Summary channel has updated its map. Now that the Russians are getting closer to Terny, there are very heavy clashes between the Russian forces and the forces of 25th Airborne Brigade and 60th Mechanized Brigade. The Ukrainians try to slow down the Russians, but as we can see, it's not. There are things they are doing is not enough for these purposes. And we got a lot of geolocated videos published by the Ukrainian side of FPV drone strikes against the Russian forces in Kreminna and Rubezhne, not Rubezhne but Priville. Yes, and as you can see, we published a lot of geolocated videos of strikes of FPV drones. So that means that this area currently is very active. The Russians are using significant number of supply and support trucks to get as many as possible, military things like rounds, like artillery shells, like weapon medicines to the combat line. And the Ukrainians try to control the territory and to destroy as many as possible trucks who are heading to the combat line. Now we're moving to Solidar and Siversk direction. We haven't received anything during the previous night. The same story about Bakhmut, Artyomovsk, but we have a lot of updates from Avdiivka direction. And mainly updates are coming from the northern part, from the area between Ocheretin and Krasnogorovka. We have few geolocated videos from this area, and first geolocated video was published by the Russian sources. For example, on this video, the Russians are saying they were attacking and damaging the Ukrainian armored vehicles and Ukrainian positions along the tree lines. And as you can see, there are two geolocations, two icons on the map, which confirms the Ukrainian control over these two territories. So, as you can see, according to the map, the first strikes of FPV drones of Russian forces took place in this part, which confirms Ukraine control, and few FPV drone strikes took place on the north of Berdichi, which also confirmed the Ukraine control. From the other side, the Ukrainian sources published one video of FPV drone strikes, that those strikes were geolocated. The quality of video is very poor, so we took a decision just to use some maps with geolocations of open source centers, And according to those geolocations, the Ukrainians were attacking the Russian positions in this area, which confirms that as a result of Russian offensive operation, they managed to penetrate the Ukrainian defense belt and to establish control over something like this. Because this is very interesting region, because just yesterday we got, not yesterday, but on the 2nd of January, we got the video how the how the Russians were bombing the Ukrainian positions in this area. So we see that the Russians are trying to enter this fortification belt, and the very heavy clashes. We don't know any updates whether the Russians managed to establish control over this part of Ukrainian positions. Probably they have managed to do this, but let's wait a little bit. Maybe we're gonna receive more geolocated videos. The only thing we know for sure is that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, entered the Ukrainian defense belt in Ukrainian stronghold, and currently are trying to dig in deeper, of course, and after that they will start moving to the north, trying to clear this fortification belt. So the battle for one of the most important and powerful strongholds in this area has been started by the Russians during these days, like on the 4th, 3rd and the 5th of January. So the clashes for this territory will continue, and the clashes for this territory will determine the next situation of Avdiivka and Russian possibilities to get inside of the residential area between the railways and continue advancing further to Kherson and Novokalinova. We have updated the territory on the eastern part of Avdiivka. As we discussed, the Russians during the previous days managed to significantly increase their foothold in this Militsaysky Dachi, and their continued movements to the south. Also, the Russians continue movements along these tree lines, and we got another geolocation of Russian FPV drones somewhere in the eastern part of Avdiivka. This video was geolocated. The Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian positions, and as a result of FPV drone strike, the entire stronghold was destroyed. Now we see that when talking about different destinations, different directions, there are a few of them. Northern one, there are two of them: Keramik, Berdichi, Stepova. Eastern one, southeastern, southern, western direction. We see that currently the Russians are focused in the eastern direction, and as I understand, the Russians are trying from this area to get, first of all, the central part of Avdiivka. But as the first goal, the Russians have to get this forest belt. This forest belt that split the residential area in two parts. This is the first Russian goal, and the second thing the Russians are trying to achieve is to clear completely the tree lines in this part of Avdiivka. So these two areas is the main goal of the Russians for the next week. After that, they will be forced to have a small operational pause. They're gonna need to dig in deeper to create a foothold for further offensive operation inside of Avdiivka. And after probably of 1 week of clashes, we're gonna receive some we're gonna stop receiving any updates from this territory. After that, the Russians probably will activate somewhere else direction. Now we are moving to the Marinka area. Some Western sources reported about the Russian progress in Georgievka, and according to information we have, as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed to establish control over few more, let's say, trenches or positions or streets in Georgievka. So according to some sources, the Russians continue advancing further to the west and establish control over something like this. Yet we haven't received even a single geolocated video confirmation, but who knows, maybe this is the correct information. When talking about South Donetsk and Zaporozhye area, we haven't received anything, and we have few updates from the from Kherson direction. The Russian published another video of the use of probably Kimskander missile. Maybe it's Iskander, but maybe it's Kimskander. The Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian warehouse, and as a result of Kimskander strike, that warehouse was destroyed. So as you can see, very powerful strike and very heavy explosion and significant damage to Ukrainian logistic and support on this part of the front line. More and more sources and more Western countries publish data and different articles about the situation in Krinky and about the very difficult situation of the Ukrainian forces on this foothold. It's like a very big mistake of Ukrainians. They're losing soldier every day, and more than that, furthermore, the Ukrainians are losing their elite forces on this direction. When talking about Ukrainian forces, today the Ukrainians start discussing the mobilization law in Ukrainian parliament, and Zaluzhny had a speech. He had his turn to talk, and he was very aggressive, and he was yelling at Ukrainian, let's say, authorities about the law. He told Ukrainians, he told the Ukrainian parliament that he doesn't have forces to fight. He need army very fast. He needed army yesterday, but he still hasn't received anything today, and he's not going to receive anything tomorrow. And he told them that if they're not going to give him forces, then he will send fighting them, let's say the parliament and the different very high-level positions in Ukrainian authority people. So he was very aggressive, and that means, first of all, that Ukrainians have significant problems on the combat line. But when talking about Ukraine, for them it's much more important to talk about politics and the chair of the president than about the situation on the combat line. And as I understand, some people like Zelensky can even lose some battles and to get some penetrations on defense belt, but to pay the price of dismissing of Zaluzhny and to blame him of these upcoming failures. Now we're moving to Crimea direction. We also got a lot of updates during the previous night. The third night in a row, the Ukrainians were trying to attack and destroy the Russian ammo depots, warehouses, and the most important Russian fleet in the Black Sea. During the previous night, the United States intelligence reconnaissance drones were flying above the Black Sea, providing the necessary information to the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians were attacking Crimea. We got some geolocated videos of some smokes and fires above the Crimea. The sources are saying that some parts of missiles and drones were shot down and they fell down on the Russian positions or in the cities in Crimea. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of air defense work, they managed to shoot down up to 36 drones. And probably the most important video or footage is the launches of air defense missiles from Novorossiysk, which confirms that probably the Ukrainians managed to penetrate the Russian air defense belt in Crimea and managed to let's say make empty the Russian air defense systems, and one or two drones caught the Novorossiysk, but then those missiles, Ukrainian missiles or drones were shot down in this area. Furthermore, later during the night we got some videos, and according to some sources, the Russians started attacking the Ukrainians with calibers, but yet we haven't received any geolocated confirmations of those strikes, so probably that was a speculation or attempt to stress the Ukrainians or something like this. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.